Hi everybody, Mr. Gunderson. I'm coming live to you from my kitchen. Today we're going to talk about Leiningen versus the Ants. Our author, his name is Carl Stevenson. He was born in Germany in 1893. He was 45 years old when Leiningen versus the Ants was published in 1938. Leiningen versus the Ants was his most popular story. It was made into a movie in 1954 called The Naked Jungle. Stevenson died in 1954. All right, so nature plays a big role in this story. As you can see in that picture, we have a bunch of ants. Ants can be a very destructive force, and in this story, they play a huge role. They are the antagonist. Now, about a month or so ago, we read a story called To Build a Fire. In this one also, nature plays a huge role. In that, we have a character, our main character, is trying to survive extreme cold. Very similar to the extreme cold we're facing right now, but not quite to the extent as in the story, because I believe in the story it was minus 75 below zero. Also in To Build a Fire, our main character didn't use his imagination. He was a very unimaginative person, and that ended up costing him his life. In Leiningen versus the Ants, we have nature, and we have our main characters trying to survive another form of extreme nature. Again, these guys. In Leiningen, our main character must use his imagination in order to survive, or else he's going to face the same fate as our character in To Build a Fire. Our characters. Let's talk about Leiningen first. Leiningen is a man's man. He's a tough guy. You don't want to mess with Leiningen. He owns a huge plantation in Brazil. So that's our setting. Think of Brazil. And he's a problem solver. He's constantly trying to outsmart the ants. Of course, the ants are our characters. They are the antagonists. In the story, it describes them as being millions of ants, 10 miles wide, 2 miles deep. They threatened Leiningen's plantation. And that's a really important point, because why doesn't Leiningen just leave and come back and rebuild from the ants? Well, Leiningen again is a guy. He's got a lot of pride. He's got a very big ego, and he's not going to just let something that's his. He's just not going to let something take it. Okay, so also the ants destroy and kill everything in its path, and there's some description in the story that helps bring that out. The peons, or workers, Leiningen's boys, his guys that work for him, they're good workers, they're loyal to Leiningen. They play roles in this story. They're not the smartest, and they're not really imaginative. They are followers, they're not leaders. Leiningen is the leader. Lots of conflict in this story. So pay close attention to that. We have man versus man. There's a little bit there. There's a Brazilian official who comes and warns Leiningen at the beginning of the story of the ants. There's some conflict with the workers, but there's lots of man versus nature again. Take a guess at what it will be. And then there's man versus self. This is another big one. Leiningen is constantly working problems out in his head. He's constantly thinking, he's constantly changing strategies on how to defeat the ants, so that internal conflict is huge in this story. Characterization. Now, we took notes. We learned a lot about characterization earlier today, and so that's what I'm going to talk about here. Characterization is really important in the story, and in this story, characterization comes out big time. So again, we learned about round and dynamic characters. We learned about static and flat, what those are. So based on, I'm going to give you some description of Leiningen. Based on this description, where do you think Leiningen fits? He's resourceful. He's a problem solver. He adapts to the situation. And he's a man of action. So what do you think? Do you think he's round and dynamic? Do you think he's static and flat? Okay, take a look back at your notes on characterization and decide which type of character Leiningen is. Now, keep looking at those notes. Think about our main character in To Build a Fire. Was he any of the things listed above? Was he any of the things like Leiningen? If so, or if not, what type of character would he be? So be ready to talk about that. We'll discuss that in class. The last thing that we'll talk about here is some vocabulary. So on a separate piece of paper, define the following vocabulary words and use each one in a sentence of your own. You can earn 10 extra credit points. There's 20 words there, and these are all words that are taken directly out of the story. Some of these words are tough. I mean, some of these are not very common words, but they're in our story. So get familiar with them, earn some extra credit. That's all I have for you tonight. That's a little bit about Leiningen versus the ants. Come to class ready to go and learn about it. All right, bye-bye.